Thank you all for coming back. We continue with the program. The panel discussion 1 with the theme Designing a Green Market will be chaired by Ms. Jane Nakano, Senior Fellow of the Center for Strategic and International Studies, United States. And we have 4 panelists for this session. Ms. Beatrice Uyudi, Director of Carbon Markets Clean Mobility, Directorate General for Climate Action of the European Commission, who is joining us online today. Also, we have 3 panelists on stage. Ms. Nancy Gillis, Program Head, Climate Action and the First Movers Coalition of World Economic Forum. Mr. Toshiaki Tanaka, Representative Director, Executive Vice President of Mitsui OSK Lines. And Mr. Hiroyuki Tezuka, Fellow of JFE Steel Corporation. The panel discussion starts with the opening remarks from the chair, Ms. Jane Nakano. Ms. Jane Nakano, please.
Thank you very much. It is truly my honor to be part of this inaugural Global Green Transformation Conference, and also to provide just some scene setter, because I think we're all here to hear from the true experts about all these actions and progress that are happening to make the market work. First I wanted to just, next slide please. So I think we've seen a remarkable transformation in the way that we look at what we can do to really strive towards carbon neutrality. Next slide, please. So as the sense of climate crisis really intensifies, various stakeholders, it's not just the public, the governments, but a lot of stakeholders from the private sector also, have been taking a lot of commitments to decarbonize. I think the transformation among stakeholder attitudes and actions are quite evident. When you look at what companies have been doing, I think it used to be mainly the climate change awareness was largely translated into the actions that related to the environmental protection, and largely carried out perhaps as part of their corporate responsibility portfolio. But these days, we hear a lot of discussions around the ESG and also sustainable development goals. And these are now very important considerations as businesses look to formulate their strategies. And then also, corporate approaches have become increasingly more of a supply chain level view as opposed to individual corporate view. And then, even countries, obviously, governments are maybe making all these carbon neutrality commitments, but even as it relates to the international, perhaps business environment, there was once time when sort of a low cost of compliance to the environmental standards was more of a sort of attraction. And for some, that was a reason to be investing in that country. But these days, that has really changed. I think, the national government's commitment to ESG standards and, SDG goals has become an important consideration. It's really the more of attraction to as companies look to see where to invest. Next slide, please. Just a quick sort of way of organizing, what's happening in low carbon technology scene. I think there's a variety of technologies out there, but they're also in different stages of readiness, if you will. And there are also different types of requirements that different sectors have. Fortunately, there are a lot of different types of measures that are being deployed, used to really help them sort of navigate along the journey to come up with low carbon alternative technologies that could really compete against incumbent technologies. For example, low carbon technologies are really key focus for various countries and economic sectors to be able to hit their carbon neutrality commitments. And these really affect the technology readiness and cost competitiveness really affect how robustly and how quickly these sectors can decarbonize. But in some sectors, such as maybe power sector, I think we're seeing low carbon technologies that are ready and certainly already starting to be deployed. In that sense, I think but you can still try to expand them. So we see governments using things like feed-in tariffs or tax credits. Since I'm from Washington D.C., I'm here to sort of brag about this exciting development in the United States, the passage of the Inflation Reductions Act that gives a lot of money towards clean energy. I guess causes, but within that, we have the clean energy provisions that really seek to accelerate clean energy technology deployment through tax credits. Also, I think some technologies are, becoming increasingly cost competitive. But I think that some governments may then become much more aware or try to see, how to address the level playing field. That's sort of right top quadrant. But then I think there are also some sectors where the technologies are not quite ready. In that case, there's continued desire or requirement for R&D support, research and development support. In that context, a lot of research and innovation grants could be very helpful. I guess one example is Japan's 2 trillion yen Green Innovation Fund. That's a very sort of major example. But then in other sectors, I think things may still need a lot more push, and it could take the combination of research and innovation grants, but then plus more incentives. But I think this is just a way to for us to start thinking about how they're just different stages of readiness. And of course, some of these things are fairly region or country specific. Different circumstances allow for certain technologies to be more competitive. So I think we all have to sort of keep that in mind. The next slide, please. And just to finally wrap up this sort of scene setter, I think how to facilitate the growth of a market where the robust supply of green products and services can meet the robust demand for the green products and services is really a key agenda, right? But then, and of course, we already talked about the role that the technologies can play, but then there are a lot of different ways to further create this green market. Cost reduction, especially along the supply chains, can make the green products more market competitive vis-a-vis incumbent technologies or products, And supply incentives are also very important. The supply incentives can steer suppliers towards choosing to produce or supply greener products. And then on the right-hand side, creating the green demand is also essential. Obviously, market can happen only when there is actually supply and demand. The green procurement at sufficient scale can create initial demand for green products, and it could be really government-led or private sector-led. I mean, for that reason, I find it just remarkable how the First Movers Coalition is there, at the industry initiated, looking to really, help create this demand. And so I'm just excited that we'll hear much more from Nancy a little later on. And then, but also, the consumer purchase incentives are another way to facilitate the green demand. Again, under the recently passed Inflation Reductions Act in the United States, consumers receive tax credits for purchasing clean vehicles like electric vehicles in the United States. So really to create both supply and demand for green products and services, there is a variety. I think but then I guess I also want to know that, there are a lot of different types of measures. Some are, economic policy, the government policy driven, others are regulations, but then there's much more market-based measures or solutions. I think for that, carbon pricing is essential. I think, the carbon pricing underpins many of these measures that could be both by the private or public sectors, But for example, the European Union's emissions trading system is a perfect example of where the government, it's a non-voluntary but carbon pricing measure that's really starting to move EU towards that carbon neutral goal. Also, I think that the Japanese government is preparing this GX League, which is composed of ambitious companies that are responsible for about 40% of Japan's emissions. So this league actions will include a voluntary ETS, emissions trading system, and rulemaking that is really important for creating a greener market. Now, I'm really pleased to turn to this excellent excellent set of panelists today. I think they'll tell us more about the actions, progress of what their organizations and companies are doing. So I guess to my immediate left, to my immediate right from where everyone is sitting, is Beatrice Yordi. She's with the European Union. I think you already heard what her portfolio is, but we're so glad that even remotely, but she's here to join us and share her thoughts on what is happening in creating green market. So without further ado, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, and a pleasure to be with you, even if it's remotely. A pleasure to be in this super panel, and an honor to be in this Global Green Transformation Conference. So you mentioned the European Green Deal has been is heart of our policy, but it has also been at the heart of European response to COVID health crisis, and will be part of the response to Russia aggression against Ukraine, with what we call the repower, or an injection in the economy from funds coming from the carbon pricing. So we have an increased ambition, 2030 ambition, to accelerate climate and energy, and more than that is to modernize the whole European economy and allow European companies to gain a greening advantage. Today, phasing out fossil fuels is imperative. We see the importance, geopolitical importance of security of supply, and what we call the Fit for 55 package, together with this repower, this injection in the economy for clean energies, can foster effective action. We want to speed this climate and energy transition, and we count on companies to participate in this transformation of society and of the economy. And the cost of low carbon technology continues to fall. Carbon intensive business will become more sustainable economically. Let me just say that with the Green Deal and with the Fit for 55, carbon pricing is at the heart of that, is a pillar of that. But it's accompanied also by other type of policies, even renewable energy push, it's infrastructure, it's a clean transport, and it's a big setup of different policies that go in the same direction. At the same time, as you know, we have proposed introduction of a carbon border adjustment mechanism for certain sectors, given different levels of ambition, starting slow and then increasing, that in order to ensure a level playing field with all international partners. So overall, the stronger climate ambition will accelerate our transformation into a resource-efficient and competitive economy. Let me just go a little bit more in detail on carbon pricing. We know that the emission trading system is working. It has reduced emissions in the power sector, in the industrial sector, and in the aviation altogether, 30% in the last 16 years. It covers more than 11,000 installations, and we know that it's decarbonizing. It implements the polluter pays principle, it internalizes an externality, and it generates revenues for climate action. Only last year, it has generated the order of 30 billion euro in Europe. So we are very happy, and we are encouraging that more and more jurisdictions are implementing or scaling up carbon pricing and the net zero commitment. We know that it needs to be a global effort. So experience like today on exchanges are personally very important, but also for our policy. So international cooperation is essential. We are in pre-COP times. We know it is essential to fight climate change, and the European Union wishes to work with partners to promote effective methods of decarbonization. In such a cooperation, naturally, but it's obvious, but I like to mention that such a cooperation, international cooperation, naturally includes recognition of other national carbon pricing schemes and in partner countries, as well as cooperation in international fora and other types of groups. Just very fastly, where we are in the state of play of Fit for 55. We are currently in the negotiations with Council and Parliament. As we know, we have proposed to extend, to set up a new ETS for building and transport and to cover more than 70% of the economy. Currently, we cover 40% of the economy. We propose to tighten the cap of emissions. We propose a diminution of emission of 61% for 2030. We want to extend emission trading to maritime, improve the free allocation, targeting even more, and also increase innovation, which is crucial for this energy transformation. Just one sentence of innovation, and it's carbon pricing. The design of carbon pricing is fundamental, and what we have set up is that part of the funds that are raised for this carbon pricing go for the innovation fund, which is one of the world's largest funding program on innovative low-carbon technologies, covering green hydrogen, offshore wind, photovoltaic, aviation fuels, and also storage or carbon capture. Last point on CBAM before I stop my presentation is that carbon border adjustment is proposed as an alternative to free allocation to ensure climate fair competition with other partners. It's designed to mirror the ETS in order to create this level playing field, and it will be phased in gradually. This is currently also discussed in both Parliament and Council, and let's hope that the whole package will be adopted soon. So let me just finish by insisting that we need cooperation with our international partners. It has to be pursued to develop affordable solutions, to develop clean projects and sustainable products, and to increase the level of ambition in all the regions in the world. Many thanks.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. And I think truly what is happening in Europe, also from an energy security perspective, is quite remarkable. And the way in which the EU and the Commission and the Parliament are all trying to address the best ways to advance decarbonization. No U-turn is really within the option is quite encouraging, but then also quite inspiring, if I may say so. But next, let me turn to Nancy Gills. She is with the World Economic Forum. The floor is yours, Nancy. Thank you.
Great. I think just to have shorter comments, since I had the opportunity earlier to speak, the World Economic Forum has many activities and initiatives associated with climate change mitigation, and of course focused on decarbonization, inclusive of course of a just and equitable decarbonization approach, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later today. For the First Movers Coalition, it does focus on innovation, the innovative clean energy technologies that we think are essential to actually decarbonize in a time frame to where we are meeting the 2030 goals, because absent meeting 2030 goals, there's really no point to the 2050 goals. And what we see is necessary is, you mentioned demand and supply, it's actually working to keep those in some type of balance. So the First Movers Coalition is focused on creating that demand signal through private sector, through leading companies, of which of course Mitsui is one of them, and we're absolutely honored to have them as part of the First Movers Coalition. But it doesn't really become productive if there isn't a supply side. And so we're very excited about what we see as far as the funding that is being made available. And we're also very excited about the conversations we're having in the First Movers Coalition. Now that we have a total of 10 governments that are part of that program, how do we not only use private sector demand, but also public sector? So how do we also leverage public procurement as part of that demand signal? So I know I had the opportunity to speak a bit earlier, so I'll go ahead and close my comments with that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nancy. It was, I think, there's so much excitement, and I'm actually glad that you sort of helped clarify how it's, it's both, as far as the timeline goes, it's not just the 2050 or, mid-century, but also it's the transitional phase that you're targeting. But then also you have, robust set of obviously government members, as well as private sector. And so, that was fantastic. Since we gained a couple minutes, thanks to Nancy, let me then get going and next invite Yoshiaki Tanaka. Mr. Tanaka is with Mitsui OSK Lines. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to talk about what is ML first before the discussions, because I'd like to introduce the profiling the Mitsui OSK Lines first. So we are a shipping company. Our corporate mission is from the blue ocean, we sustain people's lives and ensure prosperous future. This is core. And our group vision, we develop a variety of social infrastructure business in addition to the traditional shipping business. And we meet evolving social needs, including environmental conservation, is an innovative technology and service. Our group aims to be a strong and resilient corporate group that provides new value to all stakeholders and growth globally. This is very core value and vision for MRO. And this is a graphic chart of a body based on governance. And we, as a resource, internal resource, we have, of course, technology and human people, and getting the tackle to the environmental issues and increase the value of by safe operation. And this is showing the ML group, as of today, we are emitting 12,600 GHG, mostly CO2. And among that, the scope 1 portion is the blue color part, 75% is the scope 1 emissions. And the green one is a scope 3, actually. Especially the light green part is directly caused by green fuel, heavy fuel oil. That is a big part. And this is showing our climate journey, our pathway plan to net zero emission by 2050. We established 5 initiatives to achieve this target. Very simple. First one, change fuel. Change to alternative fuel. Second, enhancement of energy saving technology. This is also required for the big ships, energy saving technology. We need that, definitely. And third one, boost operating efficiency. This is the same story as maybe with JFEP. Production efficiency is very important to reduce the CO2 in all. And fourth one, this is like now I am attending this forum. So building business models to enable net zero GHG emissions. So I'd like to participate in these initiatives, international initiatives, positively, actively. And I'd like to make our opinion clearly. Then listen to the opinions from outside people. So the 5 is business. 6th one, business. Expanding the low carbon business. It's business actually. And the decarbonization project through use of the MR Group's concentrated strengths. This is 5 initiatives the MR have. And this is a graphic for showing the reduction of energy. This is showing the change of energy fuel from gray one. Gray one is oil fuels, and green one means showing the biodiesel fuel, and blue one means for so-called net zero emission fuel like ammonia and hydrogen. And but firstly, we'd like to change fuel from heavy fuel oil to LNG as a realistic choices. Now we can take, and finally the LNG should be shifted to biomethane or synthetic methane. I mean, so-called e-LNG. Then next slide is showing our activities outside fuel change, but not including the new business model. Left side is showing our first electric powered tanker. This is a small ship, but I think this is the first ship powered by electric battery. And the right side is, this is thanks for the Green Innovation Fund. We developed the methane slip reduction technology from methane. That's called methane oxidation catalyst technology. Thanks for the green innovation, and that's called recognized as a next generation project. Thank you very much for the GI Fund. This is end of the slide. As a global citizen, we will contribute to solving social issues by creating social values. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tanaka. Actually, listening to your presentation reminded me, I was recently reading one of the recent reports by the International Energy Agency, and I think it talked about how there are roughly like 85 different pilots and demonstration projects since 2021 in the international maritime shipping sector that are really looking to advance, lower carbon fuels, and I think those included, as one of your charts showed, hydrogen, ammonia, but then also battery powered, and so I just was struck by how in each of these sectors that are really trying to decarbonize, there's quite a bit of undertakings. So, but no, thank you very much. That was excellent. Last but not least, Hiroyuki Tezuka. He is fellow with the JFE Steel Corporation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Nakano-san. Being the representative of heavy, hard-to-abate industry, I'd like to share our view on the transition process of the whole green transformation. This picture illustrates a way to move up to the top summit, the carbon neutral society in 2050. As you see, so many people rushing to the top, but some industry sectors can use high-tech devices such as the portable jet engine or a drone to directly jump to the top summit. But most of the energy-intensive, heavy, hard-to-abate the sectors have no such advanced devices to jump to the summit and need to steadily climb up to the top mountain. Some climbers may take a rather short, straight pathway, as shown on the left side ridge line, but they may need to take risks to fall down the cliff and trap to the deep valley. Others are taking more winding pathway, which detours risks, but requires tireless and endless efforts. During the course of such longer-term efforts, those climbers need to develop advanced weapons to accelerate or shortcut the process while feeding themselves to survive and keep the pace of climbing. This is why transition finance, which is in line with the green transformation roadmap, is critically important for the hard-to-abate industry transition to carbon neutral. Next slide, please. This is an example of a Japanese steel industry's green transformation roadmap, which was prepared by the METI last year. The chart shows that from now to mid-2030s as a transition period, and from early 2030s to 2050s as an innovation period. During the course of a transition period, we need to deploy the currently available, best available technologies such as energy savings or CO2 gradual reduction process as much as possible. At the same time, we need to supply eco products such as high advanced the electrical steel for EVs and the high tensile steel for lighter vehicles to save fuel or electricity. Development. Then at the same time, we need to develop innovative technologies to reduce dramatically the emission from steel making process using hydrogen or carbon recycling or CCUS and so forth. So once innovative technologies are successfully developed, they must be demonstrated and commercialized during 2030s and beyond with a massive scale investment. Then move forward to mass deployment, the innovation period during 1930s, 40s. All those efforts must be supported by the transition financing. The important issue for the transition finance is the fact that since the mega scale investment, which may need to replace the whole existing production asset, is necessary during the innovation period, which is later, the companies need to keep and sound the financing capacity during the course of a transition period as well. Next slide, please. Okay. This slide shows my company, JFE Steel's transition roadmap toward carbon neutral by 2050. We set up our goals. The final goal is a carbon neutral by 2050, and the intermediate goals such as 18% reduction by 2024 and 30% and more reduction by 2030. We also set up technology roadmap in line with Japanese the government's steel roadmap, clearly putting necessary technologies to develop and demonstrate by specific years. We have announced this carbon neutral pathway as JFE's carbon neutral vision 2050, which we have announced June last year, and just recently revised with a detailed technology roadmap in September this year. We estimate that as much as 1 trillion yen investment is required to achieve 30% reduction by 2030, while continuing massive scale R&D for innovative technologies to be implemented later. So fortunately, we have granted a big amount of R&D R&D support from the Green Innovation Fund from the government of Japan, but that can only cover the fraction of the total whole investment for our green transformation. Next slide, please. Then this year, we have become among the first Japanese industries to issue the transition bond. This was supported by METI as a climate transition finance model project. The use of proceeds of this bond covers energy savings and gradual improvement investment in the near term, building production process of eco products such as high advanced electrical steel for EVs, giant monopile production for offshore wind turbines, and R&D on innovative technologies. We have successfully collected 300 million yen issuing this bond in June. But the road in front of us is so long and bumpy. We need to continue developing our effort to advance to achieve carbon neutral by 2050. To do that, supporting and sufficient transition financing, both from public and private sectors, are definitely necessary. So we need to discuss about what would be the appropriate transition scenarios, transition mechanism to support hard-to-abate industry to achieve to climb up to the top summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's certainly iron and steel is the most probably the best known, like one of the hardest to abate sectors, and listening to your an explanation of the type of efforts and the considerations that are going into working with this roadmap really help illuminate but in many ways I think the opportunities and really the positive attitude that's really arising around this the challenge. It's a really societal challenge to try to meet the it doesn't have to be, I guess, mid-century, but the carbon neutrality goals around the world. Let me now sort of move to the moderated discussion. First, Beatrice, I have a question about, I guess, I'd love to hear a little more about, where the EU is headed. So, you and I also already talked about how, ETS has been really moving European Union towards carbon neutrality. And you also mentioned how CBAM, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, is another tool. And I think once it's implemented, I think it will really further the progress along this carbon neutrality or decarbonization journey for Europe. I wanted to get your thoughts as to, in a way, sort of your current sort of evaluation. I mean, what have been some of the really the merits or really achievements, as well as perhaps some of the challenges that you are seeing thus far as the ETS is I guess happening, but then also best way forward for all these measures as they try to help EU economies move along the way.
Many thanks for your question. We are in a fascinating times, if I could say. I mean, it's the net zero. It's I think that for those working in sustainable and innovation since more than 20 years, I think that to see political masters insisting in that path is great, is fascinating, is a clear signal. And despite that we have a COVID crisis, that we have a war at the doors of Europe, and we go on with this commitment of Green Deal, of net zero economy, because we see that is part of the future economy. It's not a kind of burden imposed on citizens, but it's a way out of having a cleaner and more independent in the sense of not depending on other geopolitical situations. So this is a fascinating context. If I land into the ETS world, I have to say that ETS is currently touching very different actors. It's the steel industry, it's the power sector, it's the aviation sector, and now we go to building and transport, and this building and transport has the challenge of how to communicate to citizens in a time of very high energy prices that this is the path. So I think that the social challenge is there. And that's why we have proposed to accompany the carbon pricing to a strong social measures that the funds are coming from this polluter pays principle. So these are redistributional effect of carbon pricing, that when we think about carbon markets, people forget that depend on how you tune or how you design these carbon markets can have a positive social impact. So I think the challenges I just mentioned two. So we have the geopolitical challenge, so number one. Second is the challenge is the social challenge that as I see that it's we will need to communicate well and explain well. Just to give in brackets a figure, in Europe, the more wealthy people are responsible for more than 30% of the emissions, and the less wealthy people are responsible for 9% of the emissions. I'm talking about building and transport emissions. So there is work to be done there on this redistribution and this communication. And also we know that in Europe, as in many jurisdictions, building and transport emissions are growing. They have been growing in the last years, while the power sector has been through a kind of revolution, if I could say, with renewable energies. These emissions growing is the third challenge, which is the elasticity and the price signals and how this is going to affect consumption. And that's why we need also other type of measures and other types of signals. So I will put these big three challenges as important. And if I could add a fourth one, is the innovation. And again, in the fine-tuning of carbon markets, I was mentioning before the Innovation Fund, but we need to be able to well design that a carbon market is not only catching the low-hanging fruits and is able to invest in the medium and long-term projects.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. Really quickly, I think you essentially, I think when you mentioned the second challenge, it's sort of the matter of equity. Is there also sort of a sense of some of the labor dislocation issue that may arise from, I think, some of the comments that perhaps Tezuka-san mentioned earlier, but is that also, would you consider that to be part of that second challenge, or is it not as big of an issue within EU?
I think that with the carbon pricing covering industry is a well-known, 20 years carbon pricing. So I think that this was the discussion if it will be a labor disruption. This, I think that what we have seen is that it is not caused by carbon pricing. There are other factors that could cause this labor. It's obvious that it happened in cases like coal. And that's why in coal we have been a company or just regions in transition or different funds. So in coal was clear. In heavy industries, I think the reasons are others. We have a free allocation and now CBAM, so the carbon border adjustment. And I think there has been the two major pictures or effects.
Thank you so much. Now let me turn to Nancy. I guess the First Movers Coalition looks at, I guess, this whole time scale or the sort of a time horizon for different technologies to become more ready and cost competitive. What are the ways that, I guess, some of the First Mover Coalition activities may impact technologies along different stages, if you will? Does it make sense? I mean, it's sort of somewhat artificial. There is no clear cut of what's in transition. It depends on the sector, right? But if you can just give us a little more sort of a sense or how we might picture that.
Yeah, it's a good question. So the First Movers Coalition I mentioned, we cover what we call 7 hard-to-abate sectors: transportation, long-range transportation materials. So it is the steel and the aluminum, cement and concrete that we're launching, chemicals, which will be a focus on plastics for us, but then also shipping, aviation, and trucking. And you're right, the technologies that were referenced, especially for steel, they're technologies that aren't what we like to call bleeding edge. So they're not theoretical. Carbon capture, we have these technologies, but they aren't necessarily at scale or at price point to be fully commercialized. And that's the challenge. That's the transformative phase. And what we focus on is when you talk about we need to create demand, it is demand by sector, because depending on the sector, steel versus aluminum versus shipping, those technologies are at different stages of being available but not commercialized. And so that's why we think the value is in having companies who actually have been buying in those sectors come in and start working with existing suppliers and basically say, I still want to buy what I've been buying, but I need now this to be a more GHG reduced solution. And so it prompts the innovation of different types of engines for ships that use different types of fuels. It prompts the innovation as far as different ways of making steel. For aluminum, it's inert anodes, it's technologies, again, that there's line of sight, but they're not being pulled forward as quickly as they could be. And I think that's the differentiation. These are technologies that, if left to their own devices, might make it across that valley of death and become commercialized. But it's going to take too long. And that's why the importance of the private sector stepping in now through programs such as the First Movers, in which you have clear demand signals, not just a statement of I will buy, but actually putting offtake agreements in place, agreeing to potentially come together and build a brand new sustainable aviation fuel facility. These are types of concrete actions. And it's when you actually have an offtake agreement that you are able to make the finance side of the equation feel comfortable. Because then you know that there's actually going to be customers who, if they work with those suppliers, finance the implementation of these new technologies in the facilities, these new manufacturing processes, these new engine innovations, that there's actually going to be a buyer who cares. And that's why we also think public procurement is important, because private sector can do a lot on its own with these demand signals, but when you couple that with governments also picking up that demand signal, it's pretty important.
No, that's fantastic. And then that sort of leads me to ask you a quick follow-up question, I suppose. So as in terms of, so you talked about the importance of public procurement as well. Are there some examples of where you see, how the public procurement being a little more effective, maybe because of the nature of the industry, or versus more of a private procurement? I don't know if there are certain sectors that are much more compatible with certain combination procurement models.
Yeah, I mean, the big one that was mentioned earlier this morning in the actual sector that we'll be launching at COP27 is the cement and concrete. And of course, more than 60% of procurement is public sector for that versus private sector. So that's really an area ripe for the public sector stepping in and actually leveraging their procurement spends towards those cement and concrete offerings that are utilizing the new technologies. And here we also want to be clear, there are a lot of technologies that are making steel and aluminum and cement and concrete better now, greener. But they're not the technologies that are making them near or zero. And that's what we need. And again, we have line of sight to those technologies, but we need to pull them forward faster. We need to have them by 2030 because that's the only way that we'll keep to that 1.5 degree pathway that we understand is so essential to our quality of life. So,
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad that you sort of emphasized the time of the sense of the urgency. I think that is one of the biggest differences. The factors that are really shaping the way that we talk about climate actions, whether it's in probably Geneva or Tokyo or Washington D.C. It's really this climate crisis won't wait for you to just sort of let it be and then let it all leave to some of them of a I guess business as usual, perhaps. Although, as I said at the beginning of my sort of a thing-setter, that a lot of stakeholders are starting to make commitments and doubling down, but that sense of urgency is very important, and I really appreciated your explanation of how the coalition can help.
Yeah, if there's one thing that I can say is that it's, I think we get asked two things. One, why do companies join? And I think now it's a recognition, as we see what's happening with the Ukraine, that there's tremendous risk in not being able to better control what type of energy and how much of it you'll be using. It used to be that there was that premium associated with it. That premium now associated with these new technologies has been reduced because there's so much of an increase in risk in energy availability. The picture has changed in the last 6 months. Additionally, companies who are moving forward and becoming first movers are in part doing so because they recognize that this is a competitive necessity, right? The ability to actually work with your supply chain, in which the majority of greenhouse gases for most any organization is in scope 3 in your supply chain, and actually be part of a collaborative effort with suppliers to bring them to have a decarbonized supply chain is really where you need to be at. And you can either at this point be proactive and be first moving and create the supply chain that is going to respond to the climate reality that we're in, or you can wait. And then you won't have that supply chain, and high likelihood as carbon markets move forward, carbon pricing comes in, regulatory pressures come forward, you will not be a competitive player. So I think the companies who actually are joining the First Movers Coalition, such as Mitsui, are really the ones who are recognizing that this is the competitive innovation leadership space that they need to be in to continue to be successful.
Thank you, Nancy. Let me ask Tanaka-san my next question, which is, I think we're starting to see some more active discussions on rulemaking by private sectors participants, whether it's under the First Movers Coalition or perhaps this, the GX League that Japan is, starting to demonstrate. If you could please tell us, a little bit about, how Mitsui OSK line is, involved in this rulemaking, and also what you think is the sort of value or the contribution that's sort of unique to private sector stakeholders to this, rulemaking, important rulemaking initiatives or efforts. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. We have entered into the WEF a year ago, and also GMF a year ago, and we like to try to, of course, participate in the major initiatives in Europe and the United States, and there we'd like to express our opinion from our point of view. Then, on the other hand, we get the information, the views, developed views maybe from the initiatives, and through the participating in the major initiatives, we like to express our unique analysis or information by a shipping segment point of view, and that is, I believe, the important for each initiatives. And also, we found participating in the GMF, we have learned about the project of green corridors, where some of the hard-to-abate industries people participated. And I had the real discussion between these hard-to-abate industries and the other, how can I say, the financial people there and the government people there, and also shipping people there. And everybody gather on the table, exchange views so actively. Of course, everybody thinks that this is not easy to get through the challenge easily, but that was very valuable for us, for MOL, not only MOL, but. And I think the strength of the private sectors is speciality, I think. If there are only discussions between the academy and the finance people and the consultancy, I think it's not well balanced. There must be the how can I say, technical analysis, operational analysis from the company who has real operations. Of course, we had to evade from the low-hanging fruit solutions. But on the other hand, for example, shipping industries, maybe steel industries too, we should maintain safety operation. It's very important core value. If we use for example, ammonia as a fuel, then if we make some mistake and they spread ammonia into the air, that should be fatal damage. Of course, then this is of course one of the aspects which the real operation company who are doing real operation should be involved in to create new value chain for automobile fuel, and also that is supporting to make a new rule or regulations more, how can I say, realistic and more common or more favorable for all industries to be involved. So, and also, this is a very common value I'm talking about. But on the other hand, as a company, MOL, we'd like to maybe help us to be distinguished from other shipping company, and we are facing heavy competitions, and that is maybe let our position higher than competitors. That is, of course, our intention too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, I think that actually makes sense. I mean, you want to be at the table and be part of rulemaking, and really, it's not. And I think competition is a completely, legitimate reasons as to why you want to be there. Whether it's international competition or maybe domestic, but I think being part of that discussion really allows you be the sustained, really robust, partner in any initiatives, and for the success of your business. So no, thank you. Tezuka-san, I have a question that sort of is a little bit about, I guess, the just transition. It sort of came up a little earlier when I was chatting with Beatrice. But I think sometimes when there is a very dramatic or drastic switch in the way that you do business, and particularly in perhaps like hard to decarbonize sectors, as much as like leapfrogging could be fantastic for emissions reductions, there are also some unintended consequences, right? Like labor dislocation being one of them. What are some of the concerns or ways in which that you think those issues should be addressed, or for your industry or your company to be prepared to address?
Thank you for touching upon that very difficult to answer kind of issue. Let me elaborate from two aspects. First, if the just transition issue is coming from the very destructive green transformation, such as the coal mining case in Europe, as our colleague mentioned just a few minutes before. It is definitely necessary for the government to prepare some kind of the supporting mechanism for the reskilling, reallocation of lost employment the issues. But I don't want to follow that kind of process. The second aspect is since manufacturing industry is a core of Japanese economy, I think the best just transition process for government of Japanese society as a whole is to keep the current industrial employment as much as possible by the strategic way of thinking. For example, the strategic industrial policy to provide the sufficient industrial infrastructure to keep the industry within the country as much as possible, considering what are the necessary conditions to keep that, to make that happen. For example, providing low-cost, affordable zero-emission energy supply, including electricity, within the country, establishing affordable, abundant hydrogen supply infrastructure in this country, as well as CCS opportunities and CCUS infrastructure. If those conditions are met, then we can keep most of the big heavy to abate kind of industry base, as well as employment in those the sectors within Japan. So there is a competition between countries who can win to provide such kind of the prerequisite the infrastructure, the environment within the country as quick as possible. So we must be very serious about considering strategically what would be the next generation industrial policy is going to be.
Interesting.
But
go ahead. Yeah.
But let me conclude with the fundamental prerequisite to make this happen. That is sound continuous economic growth. Because our industry, for example, steel industry, need to replace most of the production, the facility production process in the coming decades to the green one. It's a massive deployment of the investment, as I mentioned. So the economy must be sound and growing. Surrounding economy must be sound and growing to finance whole process. You know, China built up their 1 billion ton of crude steel production in the past 2 decades. That is only happened when China has growing average 6, 7, 8% annually. So similar kind of environment is probably very, very critical unless the very slow growing, the problematic the economy may not be sufficiently support just transition process. That's my comment.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I think you talked about the role that a government can, and I guess in the context of your discussion, Japanese government can provide in more of an infrastructure sense as enabling environment. I was just curious as to what maybe from the finance perspective, the sort of transition finance, you sort of touched upon the role that the green the innovation fund has been helpful, but that's much more about R&D or research and innovation side. I'm just curious to get your sense as to how the transition finance, your view on the importance or the relative importance of that vis-a-vis perhaps more of an infrastructure type help.
It's a kind of a chicken and egg issue. As far as the material industry, such as steel, concerned, to reduce the cost of the green product, we need to have a mass deployment of the technologies. Mass production is a key for the cost reduction of the material industry. That needs the huge amount of upfront investment rather than R&D process itself. So the some well-designed the transition financing, how to scale up not only the R&D support, but the implementation phase investment from public the policy viewpoint is very important.
Thank you so much. I just want to do a quick sort of a run around the, I guess, panel, just maybe 30 to 60-second comment on, I'm quite certain that you're respectively very proud of what you're working on, like what your organization is doing. But beyond that, what more would you like to see to make, the creation of green market a reality? Can I start with Beatrice? I know it's sort of all of a sudden. Or Jim. Yeah.
Many thanks. Very short. Just Moderna conclusion is an invitation. So an invitation to other jurisdictions to join a net zero commitment and to other jurisdictions to join a carbon pricing policies.
Perfect. Thank you. Nancy?
Yeah, I would say that that some of that transitional financing be for smaller, innovative pilot projects, because there's a lot of technology options available, and we're not entirely sure what are the technologies that will bring us to transformative decarbonization, and that governments actually support private sector in the form of putting their public procurement behind some of these technologies as well.
Thank you, Nancy. Next, Tanaka-san.
I think two things. One is to create the market of carbon itself. The other side is public package subsidy program, big program, for especially upfront investment. The management should bear the huge risk. But if these, shipping companies' scale is smaller than steel industry, but if we order new ships, we pay 20-30% higher capex. And the problem, sorry for my speaking, my speech is long, but for us, the supply chain for new alternative fuel is program. There is nothing at all at sea now. Then even so, we order new ships by paying 20-30% extra capex. We cannot get fuel. Then we cannot do this by ourselves, because the network, global network, should be necessary. And also locally, we need a more aggressive package from government.
Yeah, thank you. Discussion.
Let me see. Many people are mentioning about carbon pricing necessity. In a sense, that's true, but the more important for us is a pass-on mechanism of carbon pricing to the whole value chain and to the end consumers. Because sometimes in the intermediate companies need to absorb the carbon pricing. Then that is a killing effect on us for our own transformation. So the entire society's willingness to pay for the whole green transformation process is a key for creating green market. That's my comment.
Thank you. I think it's quite clear from all the presentations, but then also these comments during our moderated discussion, that there is a range of tools, and I think they all, work on different segments of the challenges that we face, whether it's the types of stakeholders, the types of technologies, and even within that, different levels of readiness, but then also, consideration could be more of a cost side. It's also clear, I think, truly, the supply and demand, we really have to address both sides. Otherwise, there won't be a green market. And it's also interesting to hear how this sort of I guess sense of equity. Maybe I'm not sure if when it's translated into Japanese, if the connotation may change. But as Beatrice mentioned, how poor or I guess socioeconomically disadvantaged have different level of I guess shouldering burden, etc. But then also the mobile labor dislocation being another consideration. We certainly talk about these issues quite a bit in Washington D.C. As the current administration really tries to include just transition agenda in the U.S. effort to meet both the 2030 target under Paris Agreement, but then also the 2050 mid-century carbon neutrality. So I was really glad to hear that also came up in this discussion. From different continents, different countries, I think we're already starting to be, much more aware of some of the unintended consequences. But then also, also when we look at the time horizon for this, the challenge, the sense of urgency, but there's still time horizon, and different stakeholders may get stuck along the way. And there are all these different tools that we're really starting to get much more focused on, whether it's the transition finance, and much more of a robust government procurement, and of course, Nancy, in your case, it's the both the public, private, but like the voluntary, very robust, effort to address the demand side. Clearly the challenge is vast, but then at the same time, there are a lot of exciting developments and efforts. So I am just really grateful that I had this pleasure to moderate a panel that really brought up so many important themes, as well as got to help highlight these great stakeholders' current activities as well as accomplishments. So please join me in thanking this amazing panel. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Nakano, and all panelists of panel 1. Thank you very much.